If your emotions control you, your life will always feel chaotic. Most people don't lose because they're weak. They lose because they react. They panic under pressure. They speak when silence would win. They feel when clarity is required. This audiobook will teach you how to silence emotional noise and sharpen your thinking when it matters most. Not by suppressing yourself, but by mastering yourself. When emotions are quiet, the mind becomes lethal. And those who remain calm under pressure always win. Chapter 1. Your emotions are not your allies. Your emotions are not your allies. They never were. They feel urgent, but they are not intelligent. They feel powerful, but they are not wise. That's the first truth you must accept. Emotions evolved to keep you alive in a primitive world. They were built for sudden danger, not long-term strategy. They were designed for survival, not for leadership, clarity, or dominance in modern life. Fear helped your ancestors run. Anger helped them fight. Pleasure helped them repeat behaviors. But today, those same emotional impulses sabotage your decisions. You're not being chased by predators. You're being tested by pressure. And pressure exposes people who mistake emotion for guidance. You have a choice. Most people believe their emotions are signals to obey. They think, if I feel it strongly, it must be true. That belief is the root of chaos. Emotions are reactions. They are not instructions. That's the key. The moment you treat emotions as commands, you surrender control. You give authority to whatever triggered you. Comment, a delay, a rejection, a moment of uncertainty. Suddenly, you're not leading your life. You're responding to it. You feel anxiety, so you rush. You feel anger, so you speak. You feel fear, so you retreat. And each time, control slips further away. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need your emotions' approval to think clearly. Here's the discipline. You observe emotions without obeying them. Observation is power. When you observe an emotion, you create distance. And distance creates choice. You feel the surge, but you pause. You notice the tension, but you don't act on it. You acknowledge the feeling, but you don't identify with it. You don't say, I am angry. You say, anger is present. That shift changes everything. Because now, the emotion is something you experience, not something you are. That's the key. Most people collapse the moment they feel something intense. They fuse with it. They let it define their next move. You will not do that anymore. Repeat this internally. I feel it. I don't follow it. Say it again. Slowly. I feel it. I don't follow it. This is not suppression. This is mastery. Suppression is pretending nothing is there. Mastery is knowing exactly what is there and choosing anyway. You have a choice. Every emotional moment presents a fork in the road. One path is reaction. The other is control. Reaction feels natural. Control feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is not danger. And comfort is not progress. That's the trap. Your mind has been trained to chase relief, to escape tension, to resolve discomfort immediately. But clarity does not live in comfort. Clarity lives after restraint. When you delay reaction, your thinking sharpens. When you slow down, patterns emerge. When you stay still, others reveal themselves. That's why calm people dominate conversations without speaking much. That's why disciplined minds win negotiations without aggression. That's why emotional silence creates authority. It's not about being cold. It's about being clear. It's not about denying emotion. It's about denying emotion control. Say it again. I feel it. I don't follow it. Real-world application begins immediately. The next time something triggers you, pause. Don't respond. Don't explain. Don't justify. Count to 5. Breathe once, deeply. Ask one question internally. If I were calm, what would I do? That question bypasses emotion and activates intelligence. You don't need their permission to take time. You don't need to react to prove strength. You don't need to respond to everything you feel. Strength is restraint. Most people confuse emotional expression with honesty. They think saying everything they feel is authenticity. It's not. It's exposure. And exposure without discipline is weakness. Your feelings are private data, not public commands. Use them for information, not direction. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Fear tells you uncertainty exists. Anxiety tells you stakes are high. But none of them tell you what to do next. That decision belongs to you. You have a choice. When you obey emotion, life feels urgent and chaotic. When you observe emotion, life becomes strategic. That's the difference between people who survive and people who lead. Leadership begins internally. Before you control outcomes, you must control impulses. Before you dominate environments, you must dominate reactions. This chapter is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming ungovernable. Ungovernable by fear. Ungovernable by anger. Ungovernable by pressure. Say it again. I feel it. I don't follow it. This is the foundation. Without this discipline, every other principle collapses. You can't think clearly if emotions are loud. You can't act decisively if feelings are driving. You can't stay consistent if moods dictate movement. Control starts here. You mastered the first truth. Your emotions are not your allies. Now it's time to confront what happens when you let them act for you. You understand the feeling. Now you must eliminate the reaction. Chapter 2. Reaction is the fastest way to lose control. Reaction is the fastest way to lose control. Not slowly. Not eventually. Immediately. The moment you react emotionally, authority leaves you. It doesn't disappear. It transfers. To the comment that triggered you. To the delay that frustrated you. To the person who provoked you. That's the truth most people refuse to face. You have a choice. Every reaction is a handover of power. You didn't decide your move, the situation did. You didn't choose your response, the trigger chose it for you. That's the key. Reactive people believe they are standing up for themselves. In reality, they are exposing themselves. They speak too fast. They explain too much. They escalate without thinking. And in doing so, they reveal their emotional center. Once someone knows what makes you react, they can control you. A raised voice, a dismissive tone, silence, disrespect. You react and they learn. Calm people don't give that information away. Calm is not passive. Calm is unreadable. Unreadable people are dangerous, not because they attack, but because they don't expose. That's why calm individuals dominate negotiations. That's why composed leaders intimidate without aggression. That's why silence unsettles emotional people. Because reaction is predictable. Calm is not. Say this internally. I pause. I choose. Say it again. I pause. I choose. This pause is not weakness. It is the moment control is reclaimed. Most people feel something and move instantly. No space, no gap, no thought. That gap is everything. Between stimulus and response is where discipline lives. When you remove the gap, emotion drives. When you protect the gap, intelligence leads. You have a choice. The world is designed to provoke reaction. News cycles, social media, deadlines, conflicts. Everything competes for your emotional output. Why? Because emotional people are easy to steer. Angry people are loud but sloppy. Anxious people are busy but ineffective. Reactive people feel powerful but move predictably. Control belongs to those who delay. Here's a hard truth. If someone can make you react, they outrank you psychologically. They may not be smarter. They may not be stronger. But in that moment, they are above you. That's the key. Power is not about force. Power is about self-command. When you react, you surrender that command. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need to respond immediately to prove competence. You don't need to explain yourself under pressure. Reaction is emotional relief disguised as action. Feels good for a moment. Then it costs you reputation, leverage, position. Calm individuals understand something reactive people don't. Time favors the composed. When you don't react, the other side fills the silence. They talk more. They reveal motives. They expose weaknesses. You learn. They leak. That's the advantage. Silence creates pressure. Reaction releases it. Most people rush to release tension. They can't tolerate discomfort. But discomfort is leverage. When you remain calm while others react, you control the frame. Say it again. I pause. I choose. Real-world discipline looks like this. Someone criticizes you publicly. Your impulse is to defend. Pause. Someone delays a response. Your impulse is to chase. Pause. Someone tries to provoke emotion. Your impulse is to correct them. Pause. That pause is not empty. It is active restraint. Inside that pause, you assess. You choose words deliberately or choose silence. You decide based on outcome, not feeling. That's the difference between emotional adults and emotional children. Children react. Leaders respond. It's not about suppressing expression. It's about timing expression. Emotion expressed at the wrong time is sabotage. That's the key. You don't eliminate emotion, you delay action. Delay creates clarity. Clarity creates precision. Precision creates authority. Reactive people think fast. Calm people think accurately. Accuracy wins long term. You have a choice. Each time you resist reacting, you strengthen self-command. Each time you hold the pause, discipline compounds. Each time you choose instead of react, control increases. This is training. You are conditioning your nervous system to tolerate intensity without movement. That's mastery. Over time, triggers lose power because they no longer get obedience. Remember this. What doesn't get obedience weakens. Triggers survive on reaction. Starve them. Say it again. I pause. I choose. This chapter teaches you restraint. But restraint alone is not the end. Because when you stop reacting, something else emerges. Silence. And silence, when used correctly, is not absence. It is pressure. You've learned how reaction gives away control. Now it's time to learn how silence takes it back. Chapter 3. Silence is a strategic weapon. Silence is not empty. Silence is pressure. Most people misunderstand silence. They think it means weakness. They think it means hesitation. They think it means they are losing. They are wrong. Silence is a strategic weapon. Noise is what insecure people use to feel in control. Talking fills their anxiety. Explaining soothes their fear. Reacting gives them temporary relief. But relief is not power. That's the key. Every unnecessary word leaks information. Every emotional explanation reveals position. Every rushed response exposes need. Silence does the opposite. Silence withholds. Silence unsettles. Silence forces the other side to move. You have a choice. You can rush to fill space, or you can let space work for you. Most people cannot tolerate silence. It makes them uncomfortable. It amplifies their insecurity. So they speak. They overtalk. They overjustify. They overshare. And in doing so, they hand away leverage. Calm people don't rush. They let silence sit. Because silence creates psychological pressure. When you stop talking, the other person starts thinking. When you stop reacting, the other person starts guessing. When you stay still, the other person reveals themselves. That's the advantage. Say it internally. Silence keeps me ahead. Say it again. Silence keeps me ahead. Silence controls pace. And whoever controls the pace controls the interaction. Fast pace favors emotion. Slow pace favors intelligence. That's the key. Reactive people speed things up because they want resolution. Calm people slow things down because they want dominance. Think about negotiations, arguments, meetings, conflicts. Whoever speaks less usually holds more power. Not because they are smarter, but because they are harder to read. Unreadable people are difficult to manipulate. When you speak too much, you clarify your intentions. When you explain, you expose priorities. When you argue emotionally, you reveal limits. Silence protects all of that. You don't need their permission to stay quiet. You don't need to respond immediately to prove confidence. You don't need to explain yourself to be respected. Respect follows composure. That's the key. Silence does not mean you have nothing to say. It means you are choosing when to say it. Timing is power. Words delivered at the wrong time weaken you. Words delivered at the right time end conversations. Calm individuals understand this instinctively. They wait. They listen. They let others talk themselves into corners. Because silence invites projection. People fill silence with their assumptions. They reveal fears. They expose motives. You gather information while giving none. That's dominance. Say it again. Silence keeps me ahead. Real-world discipline looks like this. Someone challenges you verbally. They expect a reaction. You pause. You look at them. You say nothing. The pressure shifts. Someone demands an answer immediately. They want to rush you. You slow down. You respond deliberately or not at all. Control shifts. Someone tries to provoke emotion. They want noise. You give silence. They lose balance. Silence is not avoidance. It is containment. You are containing energy while others spend it. That's why calm people outlast emotional ones. Emotional people burn fuel quickly. Calm people conserve. Over time, the difference becomes obvious. Noise reveals insecurity. The louder someone is, the less grounded they are. The more they explain, the more they seek approval. The more emotional they become, the less control they have. That's the pattern. Watch it. In arguments, the person who raises their voice first has already lost internal control. In negotiations, the person who fills silence first is already uncomfortable. In leadership, the one who talks constantly is often compensating. Silence exposes all of this. That's the key. This chapter is not about becoming mute. It's about becoming deliberate. Speak when it moves the outcome. Stay silent when words would weaken position. That requires restraint. And restraint requires confidence. You don't rush when you trust yourself. You don't explain when you know your value. You don't react when you see the long game. Silence trains others to take you seriously, because they never know what you're thinking, because they can't predict your response, because you don't leak emotion. Say it again. Silence keeps me ahead. There will be moments where silence feels uncomfortable, where you feel pressure to respond, where your mind screams to fill the gap. That's training. Discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is growth. Each time you hold silence, your nervous system adapts. Each time you resist talking, discipline strengthens. Each time you let others speak, your leverage increases. This is how calm becomes natural. Eventually, silence stops feeling awkward. It starts feeling powerful. Because you realize something critical. You don't need to win every moment. You need to control the direction. And silence controls direction. You have a choice. Noise gives short-term relief. Silence gives long-term authority. Choose authority. You've learned how emotions are not allies. You've learned how reaction hands away control. Now you understand how silence gives it back. But silence alone is not enough. Because silence clears space, but clarity fills it. You've slowed the pace. Now you must sharpen the mind. Chapter 4. Emotional noise destroys mental clarity. Emotional noise destroys mental clarity. Every time. No exceptions. When emotions get loud, thinking gets small. That's the trade. Stress, anger, and fear don't just affect how you feel. They compress how you think. They narrow your vision. They trap you in short-term survival loops. That's the danger. Under emotional pressure, the mind stops asking, "What's best?" It starts asking, "How do I escape this feeling?" That's the key. Most bad decisions are not made because people lack intelligence. They're made because people want relief. Relief from discomfort. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from tension. And in chasing relief, they sacrifice clarity. You have a choice. Emotional noise pushes you to act fast. Calm pulls you toward thinking clearly. Noise says, "Fix this now." Calm asks, "What matters long term?" Those are very different questions. When you're stressed, your brain prioritizes speed over accuracy. When you're angry, it prioritizes dominance over strategy. When you're afraid, it prioritizes safety over growth. None of those states are designed for high-quality decisions. They are designed to survive, not to win. That's the key. Clear thinkers dominate long-term outcomes because they don't let feelings dictate direction. They delay action. They widen perspective. They consider second and third consequences. Meanwhile, emotional thinkers chase relief. They quit early. They react impulsively. They say things they can't take back. Then they wonder why results don't compound. Say it internally. Calm expands my vision. Say it again. Calm expands my vision. Clarity requires space. And emotional noise collapses space. Think about the last time you were overwhelmed. Your thoughts were crowded. Your options felt limited. Everything seemed urgent. That's emotional compression. Calm does the opposite. When you slow your breathing, your thinking slows with it. When you reduce emotional input, your mind opens. When noise fades, patterns appear. That's not philosophy. That's biology. A calm nervous system allows the prefrontal cortex to function. That's where planning lives. That's where judgment lives. That's where restraint lives. When emotion spikes, that system shuts down. You don't rise to your potential under pressure. You fall to your conditioning. That's the key. If your conditioning is emotional reaction, you will react. If your conditioning is calm discipline, you will think. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need to match chaos with chaos. You don't need to decide immediately just because pressure is applied. Urgency is often artificial. It's used to bypass your thinking. Recognize it. Whenever something feels rushed, ask yourself, who benefits if I decide fast? That question restores clarity. Clear thinkers are dangerous because they are not hurried. They don't confuse motion with progress. They don't confuse pressure with importance. They don't confuse emotion with truth. They see the long arc. That's why they win quietly. Say it again. Calm expands my vision. Real-world discipline looks like this. When you feel stressed, do not act. Reduce input first. Step away. Breathe slowly. Lower stimulation. When you feel angry, do not speak. Let the emotion peak and pass. Anger is loud but short-lived. Clarity arrives after. When you feel fear, do not retreat automatically. Assess instead. Fear exaggerates risk. Calm recalibrates it. This is training. You are teaching your mind that emotional discomfort does not require immediate action. Over time, the mind stops panicking. It waits for instruction. That's mastery. Most people live in reactive loops. They feel something. They act. They regret. They repeat. Clear thinkers break the loop. They feel. They pause. They think. They choose. That pause is where outcomes change. That's the key. Long-term dominance belongs to those who can tolerate emotional noise without responding to it. They can sit with uncertainty. They can sit with tension. They can sit with silence. Others can't. Others rush to escape. That's why clear thinkers end up ahead, not because they move faster, but because they move accurately. Accuracy compounds. Impulses don't. You have a choice. You can let emotions compress your thinking, or you can use calm to expand it. Calm doesn't make you slow. It makes you precise. Calm doesn't make you passive. It makes you deliberate. Calm doesn't remove ambition. It directs it. Say it again. Calm expands my vision. This chapter is about reclaiming mental space. Because without space, there is no strategy. Without strategy, there is only reaction. And reaction always serves something outside you. Clarity serves you. You've learned that silence slows the pace. Now you understand why that matters. Silence removes noise. Calm restores vision. But clarity alone is not enough. Because clarity requires distance. And distance requires detachment. You've quieted the noise. Now it's time to step back and see cleanly. Chapter 5. Detach to think precisely. Detachment is not weakness. Detachment is perspective. Most people hear the word detach and think it means not caring. They're wrong. Detachment does not remove commitment. It removes distortion. That's the key. When you are emotionally attached, you are inside the problem. When you detach, you step above it. And from above, everything becomes clearer. You have a choice. You can stay fused to your emotions or you can observe them. Fused minds react. Detached minds calculate. Say it internally. I observe. I calculate. Say it again. I observe. I calculate. Emotional identification is the enemy of precision. When you identify with anger, you defend instead of analyze. When you identify with fear, you avoid instead of assess. When you identify with pride, you protect ego instead of outcome. That's how mistakes compound. Detachment breaks that cycle. The moment you stop saying, "This is happening to me," and start saying, "This is happening," clarity returns. That single shift creates distance. Distance creates objectivity. Objectivity creates leverage. That's the key. When you detach, problems stop feeling personal. And when problems stop feeling personal, they stop controlling you. They become puzzles. Puzzles are meant to be solved, not feared. Most people don't solve problems. They react to them emotionally. They take things personally. They interpret events as attacks. They assume intent where there is none. And that emotional interpretation corrupts decision-making. Detached thinkers don't do that. They ask different questions. Not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is this situation asking for?" Not, "How do I feel about this?" but "What produces the best outcome?" That's the difference. You don't need their permission to detach. You don't need to feel calm before thinking clearly. You don't need emotional certainty to act intelligently. Detachment is a discipline, not a mood. You practice it regardless of how you feel. That's the key. Real detachment means watching your internal reactions the same way you watch external events. You notice the spike in emotion. You label it. You do not obey it. You step back mentally. You say, "Interesting. Anger is present. Interesting. Fear is here." No judgment. No suppression. Just observation. Say it again. I observe. I calculate. This turns emotional energy into usable data. Anger might indicate a boundary issue. Fear might indicate uncertainty. Anxiety might indicate importance. You extract the information, then discard the emotional charge. That's precision. Most people throw away the information and keep the emotion. You will do the opposite. This is how leaders think. This is how strategists operate. This is how calm individuals dominate complex environments. They are not inside the chaos. They are above it. That's the advantage. Detachment allows you to see patterns others miss. While they argue, you analyze. While they panic, you position. They burn energy. You conserve it. Over time, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. You have a choice. You can stay emotionally entangled or you can step back and think clearly. Stepping back feels unnatural at first. Your nervous system is used to immediate engagement. It wants to react. It wants to feel involved. But involvement is not effectiveness. That's the key. Precision requires distance. Think of a chess player. They don't identify with individual pieces. They don't panic when one is threatened. They see the board. Detached thinking is seeing the board. Emotional thinking is obsessing over one move. When you detach, you stop overreacting to small events. You stop escalating minor issues. You stop wasting energy on ego battles. You start moving deliberately. Say it again. I observe. I calculate. Real-world discipline looks like this. When conflict arises, step back mentally. Lower your voice. Slow your breathing. Create distance before engaging. When faced with a setback, don't label it as failure. Label it as feedback. Emotion says, "This is bad." Detachment asks, "What does this show me?" When someone provokes you, don't ask, "How do I respond?" Ask, "What response gives me advantage?" That shift changes outcomes. Detachment is how you stop being manipulated. People manipulate emotions, not logic. When you don't emotionally engage, manipulation fails. That's power. This chapter is about moving from reaction to calculation. Calculation doesn't mean coldness. It means clarity. You can care deeply and still think clearly. You can be committed and still detached. That balance is mastery. You've learned how to quiet emotional noise. You've learned how calm expands vision. Now you've learned how detachment sharpens precision. But detachment alone is not enough. Because the real test comes when pressure arrives. You can think clearly in calm moments. The question is, can you do it when stakes are high? You've stepped back. Now it's time to step forward under pressure. Chapter 6. Pressure reveals the disciplined. Pressure reveals everything. Not talent. Not potential. Not intention. Discipline. Anyone can think clearly when life is easy. Anyone can speak calmly when nothing is at stake. Anyone can appear confident when conditions are comfortable. That proves nothing. Mastery is revealed only under pressure. That's the key. Pressure strips away performance. It exposes conditioning. When stress hits, you don't rise to who you want to be. You fall to who you've trained yourself to be. And most people have trained reaction. They panic. They rush. They speak too much. They abandon principles to escape discomfort. Pressure doesn't create weakness. It reveals it. You have a choice. You can let pressure break you, or you can let it sharpen you. Say it internally. Pressure sharpens me. Say it again. Pressure sharpens me. Pressure is not the enemy. Lack of preparation is. Pressure is simply intensity. Intensity applied to an undisciplined mind creates chaos. Intensity applied to a disciplined mind creates focus. That's the difference. When stakes rise, emotional people collapse inward. Their thinking narrows. Their behavior becomes erratic. Disciplined people do the opposite. They slow down. They simplify. They execute fundamentals. Because they've trained for this moment. That's the key. You don't train calm when life is calm. You train calm when you are uncomfortable. Discipline is built in friction. Small moments of restraint. Small acts of control. Repeated daily. That's how pressure becomes familiar instead of threatening. Most people avoid pressure. They seek comfort. They escape stress. In doing so, they remain fragile. Fragility is hidden until pressure arrives. Then it's exposed publicly. Pressure is honest. It doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't slow down for your emotions. It demands a response. And your response reveals your level. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need perfect conditions to act professionally. You don't need to feel confident to behave confidently. Discipline precedes confidence. That's the key. When pressure hits, disciplined people rely on structure, not emotion. They breathe deliberately. They speak less. They focus on what's controllable. Emotional people do the opposite. They look outward. They blame circumstances. They escalate emotionally. That's how pressure defeats them. Say it again. Pressure sharpens me. Real-world discipline looks like this. Deadlines tighten. You slow your movements. Conflict rises. You lower your voice. Uncertainty increases. You return to fundamentals. This is counterintuitive. Pressure screams, move faster. Discipline whispers, move cleaner. That whisper wins. Mastery under pressure is not dramatic. It is boring. It looks simple. It looks calm. It looks controlled. That's why people underestimate it. But boring discipline outperforms emotional intensity every time. That's the key. Pressure tests alignment. When values are weak, pressure bends behavior. When discipline is strong, pressure reinforces it. This is why leaders are judged in crisis. This is why reputations are built under stress. This is why calm under fire commands respect. Anyone can talk principles. Few can hold them when it's uncomfortable. You will be one of the few. You have a choice. Each time pressure appears, you can see it as a threat or as training. Threat mindset creates fear. Training mindset creates growth. Pressure is a mirror. It shows you where discipline is lacking. And that's useful if you're willing to see it. Most people avoid that mirror. They numb themselves. They distract themselves. They blame others. Disciplined people do the opposite. They study their reactions. They note where composure slipped. They train that weakness deliberately. That's how pressure becomes an ally. Say it again. Pressure sharpens me. You sharpen a blade by applying resistance. You sharpen the mind the same way. Without resistance, nothing improves. Comfort dulls. Pressure sharpens. This chapter is about reframing stress. Stress is not proof that something is wrong. It is proof that something matters. What matters deserves discipline. You don't rise above pressure by avoiding it. You rise by meeting it prepared. Prepared means regulated. Prepared means practiced. Prepared means calm by design, not by chance. That's the key. You will not wait for pressure to disappear. You will become someone pressure cannot destabilize. This is where calm stops being a concept and becomes identity. You are no longer someone who hopes to stay composed. You are someone who expects yourself to. Expectation changes behavior, and behavior under pressure is everything. You've learned how emotions are not allies. You've learned how reaction gives away control. You've learned how silence creates leverage. You've learned how calm restores clarity. You've learned how detachment creates precision. Now you've learned the test. Pressure reveals the disciplined. But there is something even more powerful than discipline under pressure. Something people feel instantly without you saying a word. It's authority. And true authority is invisible. You've mastered yourself under stress. Now it's time to understand how that mastery is perceived by others. Chapter 7. Emotional control is invisible authority. Authority does not announce itself. It is felt. You don't argue with it. You don't challenge it easily. You sense it and adjust. That is invisible authority. And it comes from emotional control. People instinctively follow those who are unshaken. not because they are loud, not because they dominate conversations, but because they remain steady when others wobble. That's the key. In moments of uncertainty, humans look for stability. In moments of stress, they look for composure. In moments of conflict, they look for someone who does not lose themselves. Calm presence answers all three. You have a choice. You can try to earn respect by force, or you can command it through control. Force demands attention. Control attracts it. That's the difference. Say it internally. Stillness speaks for me. Say it again. Stillness speaks for me. Most people misunderstand authority. They think it comes from titles, from volume, from explanation. It doesn't. Authority comes from self-regulation. When someone remains calm while others react, the room shifts. When someone doesn't rush to speak, others listen more closely. When someone doesn't defend themselves emotionally, their position strengthens. This is not theory. This is instinct. Humans are wired to trust the unshaken. That's the key. Think about crisis situations. The person who panics spreads panic. The person who stays calm stabilizes everyone else. They don't need to say much. Their presence alone regulates the environment. That is power. Emotional control sends a silent signal. I can handle this. And that signal creates trust. You don't need their permission to be composed. You don't need to explain your calm. You don't need to justify your silence. Stillness speaks for you. Most people talk to be seen. Calm people are seen because they don't need to talk. That's authority. Authority is not trying to convince. It's not proving competence. It's not chasing validation. Authority is certainty without noise. That's the key. When you control your emotions, others feel safe around you. Safe enough to listen. Safe enough to follow. Safe enough to defer. Even dominant personalities instinctively slow down around calm individuals. Why? Because calm cannot be rushed. Calm cannot be pushed. Calm does not react. And what cannot be moved easily becomes the center. You become the reference point. Say it again. Stillness speaks for me. Real-world discipline looks like this. In meetings, you don't fight for airtime. You speak last or not at all. Your words land heavier because they are rare. In conflict, you don't match intensity. You lower it. Others escalate, you ground. In leadership moments, you don't micromanage emotions. You manage tone. Your calm becomes contagious. That's invisible authority. People don't remember everything you say. They remember how you made them feel under pressure. If your presence calms the room, you lead, whether officially or not. That's the truth. Emotional people try to control others. Disciplined people control themselves. And self-control is magnetic. That's the key. Stillness also protects you. When you don't react emotionally, others hesitate to test you. They don't know where the line is. They don't know what triggers you. Uncertainty creates respect. Predictable emotion invites manipulation. Calm removes the handle people use to pull you. Say it again. Stillness speaks for me. This chapter is not about appearing powerful. It's about being grounded. You don't project authority. You embody it. That embodiment comes from alignment. Your internal state matches your external behavior. No leaks, no cracks. When people sense that alignment, they respond. You don't chase leadership. Leadership forms around you. Because in unstable environments, stability becomes valuable. And emotional control is stability. You have a choice. You can continue trying to be heard, or you can become someone others listen to naturally. Listening is earned by composure. Composure is earned by discipline. Discipline is built daily. This is not about charisma. Charisma fades under stress. This is about presence. Presence remains. Presence is why calm people seem taller without height. Why they command rooms without speaking. Why their approval feels heavier than praise from louder voices. That's invisible authority. And it cannot be faked. It must be trained. Say it again. Stillness speaks for me. As you master emotional control, you'll notice a shift. People interrupt you less. They rush you less. They explain themselves more. Not because you demanded it, but because your calm reset the power dynamic. That's the reward. But there is a trap here. Many people discover authority and then start explaining it. They start talking again. They start justifying. They start performing. And they lose it. Authority dies the moment you feel the need to prove it. That's the key. Which brings us to the next discipline. If silence creates authority, then over-explaining destroys it. You've learned how calm commands respect. Now you must learn how to stop giving that respect away. You've become steady. You've become grounded. You've become authoritative. Now it's time to remove the final leak. Chapter 8. Stop explaining, start executing. Over-explaining is emotional leakage disguised as logic. It sounds reasonable. It feels responsible. But it weakens you. That's the key. People don't over-explain because the situation requires it. They over-explain because they want to be understood. They want approval. They want relief from uncertainty. Explanation becomes a coping mechanism. But coping is not execution. You have a choice. You can talk about what you're doing or you can do it. One builds image. The other builds outcomes. Outcomes are permanent. Say it internally. I act. I don't announce. Say it again. I act. I don't announce. Explanation feels productive because it creates movement. But it's verbal movement, not progress. Words burn energy without producing results. Execution is silent. That's why it's powerful. When you explain too much, you reveal doubt. You signal that you need agreement. You expose emotional investment in being accepted. Confident action needs none of that. That's the key. Action requires no validation. Results speak permanently. They don't argue. They don't negotiate. They don't need defense. Most people explain because they are still unsure. They want feedback before commitment. They want reassurance before risk. But certainty comes after action, not before. You don't need their permission to move forward. You don't need consensus to execute. You don't need to convince anyone before taking the next step. Execution clarifies everything. Explanation delays clarity. Say it again. I act. I don't announce. Over-explaining is often a form of fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being wrong. Fear of standing alone. So people narrate their intentions. They soften their decisions. They hedge their moves. In doing so, they dilute authority. Authority acts cleanly. Clean action has no footnotes. When you explain less, your actions carry more weight. When you announce less, your results feel larger. When you stop narrating, people start watching. That's power. Real-world discipline looks like this. If you decide to change direction, change it. Don't justify it emotionally. If you commit to a standard, enforce it. Don't explain why it matters. If you take action, let the outcome speak. Don't pre-defend it. This restraint is uncomfortable. The ego wants recognition. It wants to be seen. It wants reassurance. But discipline denies the ego. That's the key. People who explain constantly are trying to manage perception. People who execute manage reality. Reality always wins. You have a choice. You can invest energy into how things look or into how things work. One fades quickly. The other compounds. Execution builds credibility. Explanation spends it. Say it again. I act. I don't announce. Silence plus execution is lethal. You don't threaten. You don't posture. You move. Then you let others adjust. That's how leadership actually functions. People don't follow speeches. They follow evidence. Evidence doesn't need explanation. Over time, you'll notice a shift. When you stop explaining, people stop questioning. When you stop announcing, people start respecting. When you stop justifying, your decisions feel final. That's invisible authority in action. But be careful. Execution without emotional control becomes impulsive. Silence without clarity becomes avoidance. This chapter builds on everything before it. You learn to control emotion. You learn to pause. You learn to stay silent. You learn to think clearly. You learn to detach. You learn to stay disciplined under pressure. You learn to command respect through stillness. Now execution becomes clean, not rushed, not emotional, not performative, just precise. Say it one last time. I act. I don't announce. This is how you stop leaking power. But there is one final level. When you stop reacting. When you stop explaining. When you stop seeking validation. You become untouchable. Because nothing hooks you anymore. No comment. No delay. No opinion. That is the highest form of freedom. You've learned to act silently. Now you must understand what happens when nothing triggers you. Chapter 9. Unreactive minds become untouchable. When nothing triggers you, nothing controls you. That is not a metaphor. It is a law. Every trigger is a handle. Every handle can be pulled. Every pull is control. Most people walk through life covered in handles. Ego, fear, approval, validation, and the world pulls them constantly. You have a choice. You can live reactively, or you can become untouchable. Untouchable does not mean isolated. It means ungoverned. Say it internally. Nothing owns me. Say it again. Nothing owns me. Reactive minds are easy to predict, easy to manipulate, easy to exhaust. Say the right words, they explode. Delay the response, they panic. Ignore them, they spiral. Their emotions do the work for others. Unreactive minds don't offer that access. When you don't react, the chain breaks. Stimulus arrives, but nothing follows. No explosion. No defense. No chase. That silence is freedom. That's the key. Emotional independence is the highest form of freedom. Not financial. Not physical. Psychological. If your mood depends on external events, you are not free. If your peace depends on others' behavior, you are not free. If your confidence rises and falls with opinion, you are not free. Freedom begins when emotions stop dictating movement. You feel, but you are not pulled. You notice, but you do not chase. You observe, but you remain centered. Say it again. Nothing owns me. Most people believe reacting proves strength. They think silence means submission. The opposite is true. Reaction signals vulnerability. Silence signals sovereignty. The person who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. That's the key. Think about arguments. The one who reacts first loses position. The one who stays calm controls direction. Think about manipulation. Manipulators rely on emotional hooks. Take away the hook, and manipulation fails. Unreactive minds frustrate toxic people because they get no reward, no drama, no engagement, no emotional supply. Eventually, they stop trying. That's power. Real-world discipline looks like this. Someone disrespects you. You don't rush to defend. You note it. You adjust boundaries. You move accordingly. Someone ignores you. You don't chase. You stay steady. You continue forward. Someone criticizes you unfairly. You don't internalize it. You evaluate the data. You discard the noise. That's emotional independence. You don't need their permission to stay grounded. You don't need their response to validate your direction. You don't need their agreement to maintain composure. Nothing owns you. Say it again. Nothing owns me. Unreactive does not mean passive. It means intentional. You still act. You still decide. But you do it without emotional compulsion. Compulsion is slavery. Choice is freedom. That's the difference. Most people act to escape feeling. You act to create outcome. That separation is everything. This chapter is where mastery becomes obvious. Because once reactions disappear, clarity stabilizes. Consistency forms. Confidence stops fluctuating. You no longer ride emotional waves. You build direction. Direction beats intensity every time. That's the key. You will notice something else. When nothing triggers you, people change how they interact with you. They test less. They push less. They respect more. Not because you demanded it, because you removed leverage. A person without triggers is unpredictable in the best way. They can't be rushed. They can't be baited. They can't be shaken. That's untouchable. Say it again. Nothing owns me. This is the freedom most people never reach. They manage emotions. They suppress reactions. They fake calm. But inside they are still owned. You are not faking. You have trained. And training creates truth. This is the point where emotional discipline stops being effort and becomes identity. You no longer ask, should I react? Reaction is no longer an option. That's mastery. But mastery always leads to a final question. What does this give you in the real world? Not just peace, but advantage. Because calm does more than protect you. Puts you ahead. You've removed all hooks. You've removed all triggers. You've removed all emotional chains. Now there is only one thing left. The final advantage. Chapter 10. Calm is the final competitive advantage. Calm is the final competitive advantage. Everything else can be copied. Skills can be learned. Knowledge can be stolen. Strategies can be reverse engineered. But emotional discipline cannot be faked. That's the key. You can rehearse confidence. You can imitate competence. You can borrow ideas. But you cannot pretend to be calm under pressure for long. Pressure exposes the truth. And the truth is this: the calm mind outlasts. The calm mind outperforms. The calm mind outthinks the reactive one. Every time, say it internally. I remain calm. I remain dominant. Say it again. I remain calm. I remain dominant. Most competition today is emotional, not intellectual. People burn out. They lose focus. They get distracted by noise, opinion, and urgency. They sprint emotionally and collapse. Calm people don't sprint. They pace. And pacing wins long games. That's the difference. Reactive people look impressive early. They move fast. They talk big. They show intensity. But intensity without regulation destroys consistency. Calm creates consistency. Consistency creates leverage. Leverage creates dominance. That's the key. In business, calm thinkers don't chase trends, they position early. In conflict, calm individuals don't escalate. They de-escalate and win quietly. In life, calm people don't panic, they adapt. Adaptation beats force. You have a choice. You can keep competing emotionally, or you can compete strategically. Emotional competition is exhausting. Strategic competition is efficient. Calm people conserve energy. They choose battles. They act with precision. Others react themselves into fatigue. That's why calm always wins long term. Say it again. I remain calm. I remain dominant. Emotional discipline creates a compound advantage. While others are distracted, you focus. While others argue, you execute. While others explain, you advance. You don't need to announce progress. You don't need to defend your direction. You don't need to prove control. You demonstrate it by staying composed when it matters. That's the key. The calm mind sees options others miss. Because emotional noise blinds people. Anger narrows vision. Fear exaggerates risk. Anxiety rushes decisions. Calm removes distortion. With distortion gone, reality becomes readable. Readable reality is controllable reality. That's dominance. You don't dominate by force. You dominate by clarity. Clarity allows better timing. Better timing allows better positioning. Better positioning makes competition irrelevant. That's how calm wins. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need to match their urgency. You don't need to react to their chaos. Chaos is a weapon used by the undisciplined. Calm disarms it. Say it again. I remain calm. I remain dominant. This audiobook was never about becoming passive. It was about becoming precise. Precision beats aggression. Control beats intensity. Stillness beats noise. Every chapter built toward this truth. Your emotions are not your allies. Reaction gives away control. Silence creates leverage. Calm restores clarity. Detachment sharpens thinking. Pressure reveals discipline. Emotional control creates authority. Execution eliminates explanation. Unreactive minds become untouchable. And now you see the result. Calm is not just peace. Calm is advantage. The world rewards those who can think clearly when others cannot. That is rare. And rarity creates value. You are not competing with the best version of others. You are competing with their emotional instability. And most people are unstable under pressure. That's the truth. When stakes rise, most people shrink emotionally. They rush. They grasp. They react. You won't. Because you trained. You built restraint. You built silence. You built discipline. Now calm is no longer something you try to access. It is who you are. Say it one final time. I remain calm. I remain dominant. This is not a motivational phrase. It is an operating system. From this point forward, you pause before you move. You think before you speak. You choose before you act. You don't seek relief. You seek results. You don't chase validation. You build outcomes. You don't react to pressure. You use it. That is the final advantage. And once you have it, nothing else compares. The reactive will always be behind you. The emotional will always be confused. The loud will always be tired. You will be calm, and calm always wins. Every advantage in life collapses without emotional control. Intelligence means nothing if panic leads. Strength means nothing if anger decides. From this moment forward, you no longer react, you respond. You no longer chase relief, you choose clarity. Silence your emotions, not to feel less, but to think more. Sharpen your mind, not for comfort, but for control. The world is loud. Most people are reactive. You will be calm. You will be precise. You will be disciplined. Now close this audiobook and apply it. Control yourself, or be controlled by everything else.